All right, Bill. So I'm recording. I hope that I'm also getting audio from you. We'll see how this works.
Hello. Can everyone hear me and see me? Well, or see my screen at any rate?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. The impetus for this talk is that I had just finished an email exchange with somebody who wanted to know about using PDP-8SimH, and the fastest way I knew how to put him onto that was to have him sync up with our development tree. But the development tree didn't use Git. It didn't use GitHub. It used this thing called Fossil. And I felt obligated to explain why we went with this Fossil thing instead of using what everybody uses. Because, back when MIT was going to adopt Linux, people said, "Oh, no, we should have NetBSD because NetBSD is so much better than Linux." And it's like, no, we're going to have Red Hat Linux so that I can go to third-party software vendors and say, everybody else is running Red Hat, where is your port? Not, well, I know you've got a port, but we're different. So different is normally not what you want. And so I sort of had to justify why we were using Fossil.
Do you usually have trouble on that?
Does
Yes.
anybody in the audience remember Google Code? The source repository that was going to hold on to everybody's software and help everybody collaborate? Anybody?
Yep.
Thank you. And remember what happened to Google Code? Oh, starting on this date, all of Google Code is right-locked. You can extract your software and move it to GitHub. And it's like, okay, so they swore on a stack of Bibles that Google Code was going to be there until the end, and it isn't. And now they're swearing on a stack of Bibles that GitHub is going to be there until the end of time. Sorry, I don't trust it. So, well, okay, so maybe what you want to do is create your own local GitHub. Well, when you try to do that, you discover that GitHub is Git plus a wiki plus a issue tracker plus a forum. And, oh, by the way, if GitHub were to go away, yeah, you could use Git to pull the status of all of your software, all of your check-ins. But what about all the conversations in the forum about the evolution of your software? What about all of the issues that you are tracking in the issue tracker? What about all of the documentation that you had in the wiki? Oh, well, that's not part of the source code database. So Git gives you no help in extracting any of that. So the SQLite people, they said, well, how we're doing our software development project is very similar to Git, but there are some things about how we do things that are different. So we're going to develop our own source code management system with defined differences, and we're going to use that. And so the system that they have is called Fossil, and fossilscm.org is the home of Fossil. And there's even a page that talks about there are a couple of pages that talk about similarities and differences with Git. The interesting thing about Fossil is in fact, I told Chuck, call this talk GitHub in a box, because Fossil is kind of GitHub in a box. You download a single package, and when you install that package, you get the source code management system, which behaves a lot like Git, but is not the same for reasons that we may go into. And you get the issue tracker, and you get the wiki, and you get the forum. And everything that happens inside your Fossil server is part of the Fossil database. And what happens is that in GitHub, when you clone, you're cloning the source repository. That means you're cloning the source code and a current snapshot, and you can sort of get the check-ins. In Fossil, when you clone a repository, you get the source code, the check-ins, the wiki pages, the current state of the forum, and the current state of the wiki. It's all in the database. And a sync is different from an update. Sync means, okay, in my instance of the Fossil repository, make sure that I've got all the state. But in this code line that I'm editing, don't touch it. When I go in and I'm going to work on it, somebody else may have checked in some things, at which point I'll say update, and then it will pull in the things that are in the Fossil database that pertain to my code line that haven't been synced in or that haven't been updated yet. One other thing that Fossil comes with, a web server. Now, so you think, oh God, it's this huge thing. Well, yeah, it's a 5 megabyte run image, but it starts up really quickly. And last time I looked, the button object in the Microsoft Foundation classes was 5 megabytes. So I like the idea that I install a single package, I get a web server, I get a source code management system, I get a forum, I get an issue tracker, and it all just works. So this here fossil.scm.org is a Fossil repository, and it's being served up with the default skin of the Fossil web server. But the Fossil web server is skinnable. For example, the PDP-8 project that I was pointing that person at is skinned to look like this. You'll notice that there are some similarities. We have timeline, we have the wiki, we have the bugs, we have the forum, and once again, timeline. Also, I want to show you the timeline. The timeline is this really cool thing. This gives you the history of all of the different active branches of a particular code line. And as you see, these different branches sometimes get merged out or resynchronized as they're still doing development on this branch, but they want to update with things that have been happening in the trunk. Fossil does not do rebase. They think about synchronizing with the main line of code in a fundamentally different way than rebase. And so if you're used to using rebase, then you do have to sort of go in and learn a different way of doing it. I was lucky I never learned rebase, so I can't tell you how the differences are because I don't use git rebase, but I synchronize with trunk all the time. Another example of a skin is the PDP-8 Alive repository list. It's still using the Fossil web server. It's just a different skin. So let's see, what else can I tell you about? The software development tree that I'm most familiar with is the PyDP-8 software. And we recently did make some changes. Recently, let's see, ILS equations. Oh gosh. Again, we're my apologies for not, having a quick and simple demo to show you. I sort of decided I was going to do this talk a couple of days ago, and then I got busy at work and didn't really write a full-blown talk. So, a lot of this is kind of seat of the pants. But let's see. Yes, cycle realistic version. Some folks on the PyDP8 project decided that the way SimH was executing PDP8 instructions didn't jive well with the single step switch on the front panel. And so they said, well, really, we've got to kind of do up a different approach in SimH. And so there's a copy of SimH in our tree that we've branched off of SimH. This timeline talks about that branch and how it's brought in. Let's see. So let's see. I also will say that when I go to create a repository or an instance of repository and clone, I often have to go back to the cheat sheet because I do it so infrequently that I just forget how to do it.
So Bill, let me ask you this question. Many
Sure.
of us are, daily Git users. If you were a daily Git user and you're now presented with Fossil, how alien would it feel to you? Or is it just basically replace the word Git with the word Fossil? And my company, and so in particular, you talked about the rebasing thing.
Right.
My company has a strict moratorium on rebasing because it's chaos. Ooh. It's chaos inducing because when you suddenly collapse a bunch of details, it just gets messy. It's better to see the whole life cycle.
Yes. And in fact, there's an aspect of Fossil that your company might like, which is they say that, Fossil is a bit like one of those distributed ledgers. Once an object is created in the database, it is possible to delete it through the shun feature. But really, the expected workflow is if you make a mistake, you correct the mistake, and both the mistake and the correction are recorded in the database in the ongoing ledger. And so, when you bring a branch in, it brings in all the deltas rather than, erasing a bunch of history. Let's see, in the Fossil versus, I think there's actually a paper that in the Fossil SCM called Rebase Considered Harmful. Let's see. Scale. One versus many checkouts per repository. And one of the really cool paradigms that I like is what you should have done versus what you actually did. Because once again, Rebase sort of like wants to give you a clean check-in history. And so, in fact, Fossil lacks history rewriting mechanisms. There is no rebase on purpose. There's no way to reorder or copy commits around in the commit hash tree. No commit squashing, dropping, patch base cherry picking, or commit elements in Fossil. Yeah. So instead, I'm sort of used to it. In the also in the Git to Fossil translator, they say a lot of the some commands are identical. Fossil bisect does essentially the same thing as Git bisect. but repositories and checkouts are distinct. And that's what I talked about earlier, where when you synchronize, you're really synchronizing your local instance of the fossil database, and then when you update in a particular branch, then you are actually mucking with the recorded state of your timeline and of your code line. Let's see. I'm going to get a cheat sheet to remind me how to do this. Let's see. Let's see. And I generally do that. Is it from? No, it's not from. It's from contributing. There we go. So, yeah. So apt install fossil or just let's see.
Seems to be a bit of a lull here. I'm going to try talking. It wasn't working earlier. All sorts of bad things were happening to me. Can you hear me?
I've been chattering right along.
So I'd like to apologize.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. So I at the beginning of the talk, I went and I auto muted everybody except for Bill. Don't take that as a personal slight, please. I was getting funny feedback in my headphones because someone had some echo go on. So what I would ask is ask a question, but then immediately mute yourself. So that's all.
And it's in the DNF. It's in the Fedora repositories too. You just install it, Fossil. And the cool thing I learned about Fossil when I did that is it's literally a single binary. Like the whole package is just one binary, and some like a license file and a man page. So this whole thing is, like Bill said, it's let me see how big it is on my system. It's literally 5. It is 5.
So can you actually run it on a Pi?
Oh yes.
Oh, that's really cool. Because see, my infrastructure in my house is very Pi based. So if I can run it on a Pi, perfect. Otherwise, I have to have some real piece of hardware running.
By convention, the how often with Git repositories you have a directory that keeps your Git clones. By convention, we sort of say, well, in a directory museum is where we're going to keep our fossil universe, and that's going to be the fossil database, not the code lines that we're actually checking out and working. So where is my terminal window? Is that it? There we go. So if we cd museum, it turns out that on my computer here, the only fossil repository I have right now is my poetry website. If I wanted to put the TangentSoft repository on there, then what I would do, let's see, let's see. Is this copy? Nope. Let's see. Let's try that, and then let's go back to here. Yeah, there we go. So what I've just told Fossil to do is create a repository database, pydpa.fossil, in the current working directory. And I'll probably delete this because, of course, in this talk we have a password there. But that password is changeable. And in fact, I'm going to just open an Emacs just so that I don't lose that, just in case I need that later on. Let's see. Come here.
Yeah, Bill, last meeting, I'm sure Coleman would have had a really clever way to do this all in Emacs.
I'm sure. There we go. Okay, so notice now there are two directories in here, pydpa8i.fossil and poetry.fossil. That's sort of like the equivalent of your .git file, but of course it's not just the code line, it's also all of the state. Let's see, so...
What does it look like? What are those files in there?
Oh, current directory is not within an open checkout. All right. So let's go to source.
Yeah. So Bill, those .fossil are those SQLite files? Like what actually?
Yes, they are. It's a SQLite database.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The Fossil project eats its own dog food. The purpose of Fossil is to do the work on the SQLite database. And so sometimes there are features that are added to the SQLite database in order to make Fossil work. And sometimes features are added to Fossil because the SQLite database project needs them. All right, so we have the poetry directory here. Now what we're going to do is take your pydpa8i. I believe it wants me to have a trunk directory there. Oops, no, I don't want to do that. All right. Yes, trunk. And we start with trunk. Once again, trunk is kind of, it's a convention, but it's a convention, it's a convention with teeth in it. Because the idea is that the first branch that you create is trunk. And all other branches are with respect to trunk. And then we just Fossil open. So now we're in the trunk directory. And this is going to be sort of like Git. This is going to be like Git checkout. Okay. So what this did was it basically ran Fossil against pydpa8i.fossil. And now here is the pydpa8 build tree. And in fact, I could build CMH and PDP8 and all that stuff right now from this code line just by running the build. So this is like it's checked out into your build directory. And let's say that I'm going to do something naughty. All right. Give me Emacs again. All right. So here's the README file in there, and I'm just going to say add crap. Now, Save the file out. When I say fossil diff, it tells me everything in my current checked out hierarchy that is different from what has been committed to the repository. Now, there's one other thing. So now, and this code line that we're editing is sort of its upstream is that PyDP8i .fossil file in my home directory. But what you can also do, let's see, where is it? If you already anonymously tell fossil. So we can then say, we can do a sync to a remote repository, and we can make the upstream repository be tangentsoft.com. And what that's going to do is then it's going to say, it's going to, when we set auto sync, it's going to keep things in sync with that as the master repository. And here's where Fossil solves both pieces of the Google Code problem. First off, what this is saying goes synchronize with TangentSoft. So user WDC, museum, PyDP8i.fossil is synchronized with tangentsoft.com PyDP8i. But what happens if Warren Young got bored with the project and said, "Listen, I'm not gonna maintain this server anymore. I'm shutting it down." All of the other collaborators then say, well, we would sort of say, "Hey, Warren doesn't want to do this anymore. Who wants to be the upstream master?" And then we would all say, "Okay, well, now we'll just do fossil sync to poetnerd.com/PyDP8i." And, then it's as if GitHub moved from Microsoft GitHub to, I don't know, who else is GitHub? And all the repositories, we just sync to the other one. The one thing that is not synchronized is the username password database for that particular database. So the only person who has write access to museum PyDP8i.fossil on this host here, Tintin, is me. I can go into the account creation interface and create other users that would be committers that have write permission on my instance of the database. But anybody else who is synchronizing doesn't synchronize my username password database. And that's sort of how the committers are protected from each other in the different repositories. What this also means, though, is in like the GitHub forum, an individual user can subscribe to an individual discussion thread in an individual sub forum. In Fossil, that would require solving the distributed username identity problem. So instead, what happens is that within Fossil, when you subscribe to the Fossil forums, you now are subscribed to all the Fossil forums. Sorry. But in practice, it's all the Fossil forums for that particular project. So yeah, I get all of the Fossil, all the threads on about Fossil development, all the threads about PyDP8i development, and all of the threads on what is it? On other stuff, the different individual projects. Um, so that's once again, that's the cost of having all the forums data be recorded in the database. But over here, I did mutilate the readme.md, but I don't want to do that. So readme.md and fossil undo is just one level deep. So the idea is, if somebody made a lot of changes and I do an update and I didn't realize they did a lot of changes, I just do fossil undo and it just backs out all of those deltas. So let me see what else. Oh, here's one thing that I could do. So status. So it turns out that for maintaining my poetry, I use Fossil. And my upstream repository is on poetnerd.com. I did some work on my desktop and checked it in. Let's see if I can see that. Where would that be? So what I just did, I said Fossil UI. So I'm in the poetry repository. It's got the default skin. And actually, I guess it's got the default skin. And it is now showing the timeline by having started a web server on Tintin that is only accessible via localhost. Nobody else can see this website. But sure enough, here's the timeline. These are the changes that I've most recently made in poetry. If I go back to, I can then say, see. Now if I reload this, it can't find it. So, yep, Fossil UI starts up the Fossil web server so we could look at the timeline. Let's see, and Fossil Extra says, tell me everything in this build tree that is different from what has been checked in. And it turns out that I use scripts to generate HTML files from source files. So pretty much everything in the HTML directory is different. There are actually rules, just like in Git, where you can say Git ignore such and such a thing so that it doesn't track the deltas for that. So that I could say, oh yeah, everything under HTML, just ignore those differences because I've accounted for them. And I just don't remember how I set that up. And earlier where you saw when I did Fossil Sync, you'll see that it said received 1216 bytes, 2066 bytes, sent 1216 bytes, and it received 2 artifacts. So there were 2 things in the SQLite database that were different. And in fact, let me see something. Fossil diff doesn't do it, but if I say fossil fossil update, I can say fossil.update-n, I believe. Fossil update-n says, oh, the file to do will change, and the comment on it was this. Let's do this. And as you see, the fossil origin to and to-do.org got a whole bunch of stuff in it. And let's see, what else can I say? So now my laptop is in sync with the poetry work that I had done on my desktop, which was basically just editing a to-do file with some poetry that I was writing. But because I created fossil to-do.org, now you will see that to-do.org in the current working directory, scroll, sorry about that, is now different. Check, I could do. There you
go. Is there a log command, like git log? Will show you the history.
Yes. Let's see, what is it? Oh. That's not it. Yes, there is. Forgive me while I run to the cheat sheet to figure out what it is. Checking out. Committing changes. Also changes. Okay, so there weren't any. Oh, here you go. Let's see. To see the most recent changes made to the repository by other users, fossil timeline to find the most recent command, and then fossil diff between that commit and the current tree. Let's see.
So I see that fossil doesn't help people remember to do the same things people forget to do on Git, which is to add the files to the commit.
Let's see.
So Bill, how extensible is fossil? If like I see you do your poetry and your poetry is all in plain text, if how easy would it be to extend fossil to work with, say, EPUBs or XHTML or something like that? I mean,
wait a second, I got to turn up the volume a little bit. I'm having a little trouble hearing your question. How difficult would it be to extend fossil to do what?
So, sorry, I'm also playing with the levels at this end too. So imagine that, right now you do everything in plain text, or HTML that. But like one of the frustrations that I have with Git, only because I think I haven't done any research on it, is all of the stuff I write, I ended up writing as EPUBs that I can then publish through Amazon and also work on my Kindle. But the problem I have when I use Git, of course, is that when I do a commit, it says, hey, this binary file over here, this binary file over here are different. But they're really not, actually. I mean, EPUB has got stuff in it, and if I wrote a plugin for Git, it could actually take it apart and say, actually, the files inside this EPUB are different, and here are the parts. How easy would it be to extend fossil to have a feature like that, where you could, sort of add a hook in for a subfile type?
That is at the level of pointy-headedness that is way beyond my fossil ken. But perhaps, let's see.
Fundamentally, in order to support something like an SCM with non-text, you have to have a way to represent a change set or a difference, right? Like a patch. So deltas have to be representable in a semantic fashion. And you have to understand, you have to be able to like apply patches to get from one version to another version, because that's basically what the SCM does, right?
Let's see.
Yeah, so in the case of an EPUB, I mean, an EPUB is just, it's a bunch of XHTMLs and a table of contents and a few other things. So, you could envision something that would pull it apart.
Can't you just literally pull up, like edit the XHTMLs and the index as text, and then use a command to assemble it back into an EPUB later?
Yeah, actually,
like compiling, almost like a compiler at that point.
And in fact, the editing I do is actually in XHTML. I actually use a piece of software called Scribe that lets me. I have a directory full of XHTML files, and it actually assembles them into an EPUB. So it just so happens that that having sort of point-in-time versions of an EPUB is nice, because otherwise you can have a situation where essentially each chapter of a book is its own XHTML file, and so you don't want to be in a situation where suddenly chapter 1 and chapter 2 are out of sync, that kind of thing. So I like to assemble the whole thing and say, here it is at a point in time.
You know what? You could probably solve that with Emacs.
Oh, I'm sure. I know a guy.
There is I thought that I saw something under development for that. Fossil has these things called hooks, short scripts that Fossil runs at defined points of processing. And administrators can use hooks to enforce policy or connect Fossil to a continuous integration system. And it's a work in progress. The interface is in flux. Documentation is bullet points, transfers, and proper document after things settle down. I imagine in the forum, we can search for hooks. Check-in files, finding duplicate files. How to close a specific multiple template. Edit template before hook script. Avoid committing local modified files. New TLS-able Fossil server feature. Oh, it's got certbot. Oh, that's different hook. Actually, that looks like. So in the bullet point, you have these scripts. And let's see, after receive hooks are whenever new artifacts are received into the repository, the artifacts have already committed. So there's nothing that the after receive hook can do to block them. Let's see. Before commit hooks. Running a commit command before the user is prompted to check in comment, Fossil holds a write transaction on the repository. The before commit hook is running. So the repository needs to be in WAL mode. I don't know what that is. The script needs access to the repository. Commit message hooks are not yet implemented. Let's see. Nothing finished. So it's possible that a before commit hook might be able to take your file and turn it into something else. But really I think the case of cutting apart a document is, I think it's in the area where both Git and Fossil have sort of architecturally said there is ASCII text that we understand, and there are binary blobs that we don't, and that's it.
Yeah, that's why I asked that question, because the tool I'm using is not a great fit. And, it's one of these things where, depending on how accessible it is, I just wondered, and like I said, it was sort of an own goal, sort of complex question. I didn't know if you're going to say, "Oh yeah, here's a scripting directory, and you just have to create, a subdirectory for your file type, and you put some Python in here and magic."
Well, there is some really potent scripting. Let's see. Yes.
Is that guy called WLUG meeting really Tim Keller? I see a guy called WLUG meeting, but no picture.
Yeah, it's me. I have my camera off just as because
Okay, I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I'm
a little late because I had some trouble with plugs falling out and such.
No worries.
I used Fossil. I downloaded Fossil. I'm not sure I used it at all. I wanted to download something from GitHub, and I had this friend who said, "Oh no, don't use Git. Don't use Git. You got to use Fossil. It's much better because of blah 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 blah." So I downloaded Fossil, and of course, it's no good to download things from GitHub, which is what I wanted to do.
Well,
I don't care about a source code management system. I just wanted to get something. So what I think would be a great feature for any so-called source code management system is interoperability.
Well, funny you should say that.
Would it be to add
wait a minute.
That would get things off GitHub?
Wait a minute, Keith. If all you want to do is download something from GitHub, you could just go to the website and click on the download button.
Yeah, right. Now you tell me. I probably did that eventually.
So one of the interesting things that the PyDP8 project does is they use the GitHub export facility of Fossil and pushes out on a regular basis. Basically, whenever, I believe it's either on a nightly basis or maybe it's on a per commit basis, where when a new commit comes in, it pushes the deltas over to GitHub. And there is a hook that runs the auto build on the GitHub side, which checks everything out and tries to build it, and then sends us back error reports from GitHub on our development tree. There is also a Git ingest facility where if you have an existing Git repository and you want to convert it to Fossil, Fossil has that. So it has a Git export and a Git import. So it has interoperability. But once again, because the fundamental paradigm of Fossil is that it's the immutable blockchain of things that you did, Fossil does not have rebase. So if your workflow means what you want to do is now that you've finished making all your mistakes and you just want to make a really pretty repository and want to rebase, well, no. Fossil don't play that. But let's see. Here's what the bug list looks like. So let's see. So you can just reports. And so this is what a bug report would look like in the TangentSoft screen, in the TangentSoft skin. And one of the interesting things is that Warren Young, who is the primary guy for the PyDP8 software project, he's a committer on Fossil. So he knows how to make Fossil sit up and beg. So this skin is one I believe that he built. Ah, yes, that's right. Wishes is a particular slice through the bug reports. That's right. Reports. You can know how to open a new ticket, wish list, bugs, all tickets. This is what the wiki looks like. The convention is that documentation that evolves over time with your software project belongs in your files in a document in a doc subdirectory. But stuff that is not expected to change very much, that is sort of invariant about your software development project, that you put in the wiki. For example, in the OS 8, how you set up the console. That's not going to change much now that you know. And so this is the wiki. I showed you the bug list. This is what the forum looks like. Let's see. Oh, yes. FPP12, strange behavior. Problem was fixed by Rick Murphy in a patch now made upstream down into our software's trunk, so it'll be part of the next release. Yeah, somebody asking a question. We got that fixed up for them. What's another fun one? OS 8 package feedback. But here is so as I was writing this subsystem called OS 8 package, we decided to have a public conversation about the design of it. And so that's all in the forum. If you had to move off of GitHub, well, this whole conversation would simply be lost. Let's see, what other fun things? Something that I do in the PyDP 8 Alive. PDP 8 Alive is a project where I'm trying to interest other PDP 8 heads into contributing to a set of projects. And the first proof of concept was Adventure. Rick Murphy ported RT11 Adventure to the PDP 8 in 1979. Rick Murphy is still around, and in fact, he just fixed a bug in SimH last month. That was that comment that we saw earlier. So what happened was that as I was developing the running packs for the PyDP 8 and for OS 8 and SimH, I ran Adventure, but sometimes it blew out. And one of the fun things about curating ancient software is sometimes you fix really, really, really old bugs. And Rick, I took it as far as I could take it, and then found Rick and said, "Hey, Rick, it's doing this." He said, "Doing that? Oh, jeez." So let me show you the timeline here. This is really fun. So what I did for this proof of concept was I took all of the major versions of Adventure from the original version that was made in 1979 and checked it in, then did a fork. Let's see, where's this fork? Is this it? Yeah. Correcting. Yes. Where in January 23rd of 2021, we fixed a non-deterministic startup problem in version 1. And that's what this code line is. And so at different times, so this was the initial version. We reconstructed version 1.1. The original Fortran code was added as comments in the Ralph is the relocatable assembly language for the PDP 8. There's more than just PAL 8. Well, there was more than just PAL. There was Ralph, there was Sabre. So these different branches are accessible as their own separate code lines. And one of the things you can do is when you go to files is that you can select which branch you want. So here is version 1.01. And so if you look at the files, it just shows those. So for 1.3, let's see. Let's look at the files for 1.3. I think that works. Let's see. Changelog. 1.3, 1.5. Oh, this is all. No, this is still trunk. I'm trying to remember how to get the file view to show me. Let's see. Name tip trunk. All right, give me branches again. All right, branches. Let's see, 1.3. Check-ins related to 1.3. Check-ins. What's advanced? Files. Let's see, reconstructed. 1.3 modern view. Unhide. That's the timeline view. Files. Tree view. No. Sort by file name. There should be a way to go to files and say, show me the files as they existed in this branch. And I'm sorry, I'm just not remembering how to make it do that. As I say, let's see, all? No, trunk. Sort by file name, file ages. Please check in a branch trunk. Modern view, columnar view, compact view. Whoop, there we go. Check-ins. Ooh, tags.
So your PDP-8 emulator, how faithfully will it run PDP-8 software?
Well, it's not my emulator. It's SimH, and now the one in the PDP-8 project has been amended. So the current, and I have to go back and check on this, but it has just been recently updated to be what they call cycle accurate, because it used to be that the SimH emulator just sort of said, oh yeah, this is a TAD instruction, this is a DCA instruction, the state of the registers, the beginning is this, and the state of the register at the end is that. The cycle accurate version says, well, a PDP-8 has the fetch state, the defer state, and the execute state in it. And so a TAD instruction at the beginning of the, runs the fetch state, and the registers are like this, and at the end of the fetch state, the registers are like that. And now there has been no defer, so we go on into the execute state, and the execute state before and after is this. So that now the single step button on the Raspberry Pi based PDP-8i actually gives you cycle accurate emulation of the PDP-8 instruction set. But the code base of SimH is a PDP-8e emulator, which actually caused problems with UW Focal in the system packs that I built, because I built this test stand that would start up Adventure, run Adventure through a script and say, yep, Adventure works. Then it would start up UW Focal and say, well, print Pi. It would blow out. Why? Well, the Fortran 4 runtime environment on PDP-8 notices that it's running on a PDP-8e and sets mode B in the extended arithmetic element and leaves it there. Because, well, it's a PDP-8 program. When you load a program, you press the clear button, which would clear the mode bit in the extended arithmetic element. And so this was the first time where, you run the Fortran 4 environment, go back to the monitor, and then run something that assumes that the extended arithmetic element is in a known state, which it wasn't. So it's a PDP-8E with an extended arithmetic element. And I believe it has a floating point hardware emulator as well, but that's turned off by default. So there's some more code that needs to be written, more C code that needs to be written under SimH to teach it the difference between a PDP-8I extended arithmetic element that does not have mode B, and to recognize that it's not, to set the PDP-8I mode to turn off the BSW instruction and to do certain other subtleties. Charlie Lasner wrote basically the definitive detector of which member of the PDP-8 family you are running. So all of the tests are documented. It's just that nobody's written the code for SimH to do the remaining cleaning up. What's interesting is that SimH for the PDP-11, you can say, I'm running an 1134, and then your extended memory does not have separate instruction and data spaces. Or you can say, I'm running an 1145, so it has separate instruction and data spaces, and probably sorts instructions to a fast cache memory and gives you 18-bit addressing. Or I am running an 1144, and then it gives you 22-bit addressing. Or I'm running an 1170. So, it's just a small matter of coding. That's probably more than you wanted to know. But the other thing that I'm trying to do in the PDP-8 Alive project as a demonstration is files in documentation, was trying to sort of create an organized approach to PDP-8 documentation. For example, in the hardware section, in the small computer handbook section, and this may have broken with a recent, this broke with a recent update. So what's supposed to happen, let's see if it shows up in readme.md. No, what's supposed to happen is that it's supposed to give you an intro to all of the different versions of the small computer handbook, and then say, well, I pulled the 1967 edition originally from bitsavers.org. It's 28 megabytes, and if you click here, you can get the PDF. So this was a project, and the problem was that I was trying to make this to be a living repository, but the difference between documents that are interpreted and displayed in the fossil doc renderer and actual documents in the file tree, there was this divergence that I didn't understand well enough to fix. Download. Oh, that's just going to download README, huh? Oh well. But this, once again, in Skin, actually, let me think. How can I do this? I don't have my password handy. So it's hard for me to show you the skinning capabilities. I could do that. Poetry.
You could also stop sharing if you need to, and then restart sharing your screen.
That's
afterwards.
true. Yeah, hold on just a moment. Let me see if I can find this thing. All right, let's see. see. All right, that's in PDP-8 alive. Let's see. Hold on just an hour. Oh, there we go. All right, well, we'll try that. This is right. Huh, yes it is. All righty, we're in. Now, where is Jitsi? There we go. And share button. There we go. Shareteria. All righty. So, so now I'm logged in, and in the admin section of the server administration is skins. Let's see. Let's see. So let's switch back to the default skin. And now when we look at the front page, it looks like this. And you can iterate, you can edit it, you can publish it. But no, we want to just revert. Publish. Oh, cleanup and undo.
So
skin admin for cleanup and recovery actions.
So Bill, you're saying that this is at this point self-hosted. How often is it updated?
Skin admin page. And these are the default skins that you get. There are like 11 of them.
So Bill, how often is new versions of Fossil come out? I mean, it looks at this point, it looks like it's a very mature project.
Well, let's see. Well, it's actually it's a mature project, but it is definitely under active development. 11.03, 2019, really? Oh, 2022.
Can you just delete the drafts?
I'm just going to do this. Just going to go back to draft one.
Chuck, do you remember at the beginning of the talk? There's no deleting anything ever in Fossil. You keep everything forever.
There, I think that just takes care of everything. Yeah, that's better. So we're back to where we were, but there are all kinds of other things that you can control. Notification transfers, artifact recipients log, user log. Yeah, somebody's trying to get in. Well, that's all me. Oh, that's interesting.
how do you tell who successfully logged in, who didn't successfully log in?
Let's see.
Because that doesn't. I mean, that looks like some random person.
Yeah, it does.
PTP-link.net actually logged in.
Yeah, and Anonymous and Angela Hunt and AVH. I don't know who that is. Some IPv6. Let's see. I don't think that's me. 2601. Yeah, 2600. So that's the access log. Let's see. User log. Oh, that's that's the admin activities. Let's see. Error log. To create a server log. Server's running a CGI. Server's running Fossil HTTP, Fossil server commands, that command line.
Actually, that reminds me. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you're not using the actual built-in web server?
Oh, yeah. So in fact, so if you go to poetnerd.com, you get my personal website. It's served up from what is it, DigitalOcean, and this is a web server served up with Nginx. So I'm not I'm sort of, kind of, almost using the Fossil web server. Let's see, where is that docs? Poetnerd.com is an Ubuntu platform, and so I decided that I was just going to run the Nginx web server and serve up my personal website there, and then hook in to Fossil through Nginx. And so I have created configuration files. Let's see how to get there. Let's see. Let's see. You guys doing keystroke locking? I forget.
So Bill, are you essentially, you're just using Nginx to act as a proxy server? Is that what you're doing?
Yes. Local.
Nginx is actually cool enough that we should probably have a WLAC talk just on Nginx. I just don't know how large of an audience that would be, who would be interested in that.
So,
what is it?
So Nginx is a Swiss Army knife Unix utility, but one of the things that it does is it's a fantastic web server, proxy server. You can use it to act as a load balancer. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with it, but one of the ways that I particularly use it is I use it as a web server, and I like it as a web server because its configuration files are miles better to configure than the gobbledygook that is the Apache configs. An Nginx config is extremely straightforward and understandable. I'm sure as Bill's about to actually show us what his Nginx config looks like.
So it's a dessert topping, a web server, and a floor cleaner.
Right. Here we go. Poetnerd.com. This is by default on port 80. And Poetnerd.com goes to... so because I maintain my website in Fossil, I just pointed at the build tree from Fossil. And I have my access log recorded there. Poetnerd.com/poetry goes to my poetry build tree. Everything else goes to the fossil instances. So PyDP8i, PDP alive, WDC. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, what is?
And so they're basically proxying to other processes running on different port numbers.
Yeah.
Localhost.
That's the repository list for WDC. So that's once again, I fed Nginx its own tail, and I fed Fossil its own tail.
Well, one of the things that I use Nginx for all the time is someone will come to me and say, "Hey, I want to set up this thing," and I go look at, and it's it's some web service that doesn't use HTTPS, doesn't use SSL properly, none of this stuff, and I say, "Okay, fine," and I immediately run it, tell it to not listen on anything but localhost. And I immediately install Nginx, and then I wrapper the whole thing with legit SSL certs. And within 20 minutes, I can take someone's completely insecure website and make it secure.
Nice.
And it's to the point now that it's basically it's a canned solution to a problem because I hit it all the time. The last one I actually had was for someone who wanted to use a source code tool that would let you do analysis, and you could sort of if people are familiar with something like Review Board, it was a competitor to Review Board, but out of the box it's just HTTP, and it wants to get hooked up to our to Active Directory and stuff, and it's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that, but I will put it behind Nginx and then give it a real cert.
Yeah. I tend to prefer programs that are if it's a web server, then I prefer to be a web server, and I just as much as I trust Fossil with my source code, I just wasn't sure I wanted to trust it to be secure, but it said here is a way where you use Nginx as your front end, and it takes care of all the security. And then we just do, SCGI communication between Nginx and Fossil, and everything just works. There's so much to experiment with here, and so much to learn, and so much fun. Nowadays, instead of using Git, I use Fossil simply because it's really easy for me to make a backup copy on my poetnerd.com site, and then serve it up out of here. And it is my hope that others will join up with the PDP8 Alive project. And by the way, this here, what's that called? It's not skinned. That's user configuration. Yeah, trunk thumbnail. I forget what it's called. That ain't it.
So, Bill, there actually was a button there, or a thing called Security Audit, which I thought was a little interesting.
Oh, one or more users has the ability AD capability.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's kind of interesting. I didn't know if it was actually going to give you this user tried to log in 57 times with a bad password. Now, can you do...
No. Average load imaging is turned off. Fix this, set server load limit. Server log is disabled. User capability. Also, nobody can read stuff.
Anonymous can write tickets in the wikis.
Version content. Chat is off. Forum is off. Interesting. I should look and see if anybody's been messing with my wiki. So there you go. Let's see, what was it? This is mail.
Logo, it says. There's a logo setting down there.
Yeah, I think that's the one. Yeah. There it is. Current project logo is this. And that's an animated GIF that I created using somebody else's graphical PDP-8 emulator. And you'll notice it just steps the bits across. And so on my home website, where is that? And for the, I had it a moment ago. I think I closed the tab. Let me try again. Yep. Here, the thumbnail is just my face shot. So there's just tons of skinning. And one of the interesting things about fossils is there's so much to it. People actually recommend that you just use the quick start. But there's just a metric buttload of documentation. And somebody actually wrote a book on fossil, but the code evolved faster than the book. And so let's see, fossil. This is a book written by Jimmy Shrimp, originally for fossil 1.27 in 2010, updated 1.36. Currently, there is an effort to merge the above two versions, bring the whole book up to date. Now we're at version 2.17. So there is actually a book, but there are 3 editions of the book because it diverged. But yeah, no, there's just it. As I say, it's get in a box, and it, every time I turn around, it does something else that I want. But I think I've been talking now for an hour and a half. I think that's more than enough. So I'm gonna call this talk done for now. Unless, are there other questions?
I was just about to ask that. People have questions? Now would be the time.
Has anyone shown Linus Torvalds this thing and got him interested in switching?
I think after Bitbucket, I think he was a little burned.
Yeah.
Well, that's why he wrote his own.
Well, that's actually a funny story into itself, because there actually was a thing that he was looking at called, I think it was called Mono, I think was the name of it. And he was actually looking at Mono, but it was actually it was called Monotone. And he was actually looking at Monotone, but it had a thing that he didn't like about it. And he wrote to the author of Monotone, but the author was on vacation. And in the time that the author took to get back from vacation and fix the thing that Linus didn't like, Linus had written Git, which took all the features of Monotone and re-implemented them. And so, had that guy not been on vacation, we'd be using Monotone, not Git, likely.
In Monotone Hub.
Yeah, Mono Hub.
Well, that would fit with Microsoft. Mono is the open source clone of
.NET or whatever it is.
.NET, yeah, that's right.
Which is what, C#, ###.
I used to be able to take those 10 months vacations.
Yeah. Well, Bill, that was really interesting. It's interesting that there are so many different source SCM systems out there. Some good, some bad, some interesting. Well,
yeah. And right, as what was it? Was Mr. Protocol, the neglected works of Mr. Protocol? Users are bosons. They all want to be in the same state as all other users. And developers are fermions. They want to be in a different state from all other users, all other developers. And so you have people who are using source code management systems that insist on it being the same as the one everyone else uses. And then you have people who are developing them who insist that it has to be different from all of the other ones. And, learning a source code management system and really, getting into it, I guess, it's like, learning a programming language. You go to the one that you're most familiar with, and you develop the familiarity over time. I was able to get along just fine with RCS and then SVN and then Mercurial.
I was actually just going to ask, because I know that, I think all of us have had that somewhat similar journey.
But I never really learned how to merge any of them, even Git. I never really did much in the way of merging of branches and that stuff. All I ever used a source code management system for was to create an audit trail of changes I made and to synchronize with other developers. And that is the extent of my understanding of how to use everything up to Git. Up to Fossil. There's stuff that I know how to do in Fossil that I don't know how to do in Git. Because I've merged branches in Fossil, and I've never really done that in Git. So so now it's the one that I'm most familiar with, and the guy I introduced Fossil to so that he could play with the PDP-8, the next day he said, "Yeah, I'm just so done with Git. I've ported all of my Git repositories over to Fossil. This is great, thanks." I've done that a couple of times, and the first couple of times you do it, it's like there is something odd about the way that the argument order is, or something in the way it recurses down. And if you don't get it exactly right, it doesn't work. It's obvious that it didn't work. And you just create another, you throw that Fossil repository away and start over and try again. And once again, when I port another one over, I have to go back to the cheat sheet to remember how to do it.
So Fossil is XKCD compliant, just like Git.
I was gonna make that joke, but then you made it before I could, Chuck.
Where you never remember how to do anything. You just delete your entire Git directory and do a new checkout. Do a new checkout again.
Yeah.